Blue and red lights flashed in the rearview mirror as the black man pulled over calmly. He had nothing to hide, nothing to fear, at least that's what he thought. But when the officer approached, his tone was sharp, his eyes filled with suspicion. Within minutes, the stop spiraled into something darker. The man watched in disbelief as the cop bent down, slid a small plastic bag under his seat, and then straightened up with a smirk. To everyone watching, it looked like an open and shut case. What the officer didn't realize was that the man he was framing wasn't just another driver. He was the FBI director, and justice was about to turn sharply against him. It was supposed to be a routine drive home. The black man had just left a federal meeting downtown, his mind still busy with case files and intelligence briefings. Dressed in a crisp suit, his badge tucked safely in his pocket, he blended in with the stream of late commuters on the highway. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another man heading home after a long day. But beneath that calm exterior was someone far more powerful. He was the FBI director, responsible for national security, counterterrorism operations, and the lives of thousands of agents. Few in the country held more authority, and fewer still carried more weight on their shoulders. Yet as he drove that night, none of that mattered. To the wrong cop, he was just another black man behind the wheel. The neighborhood he passed through was known for its tense relationship with law enforcement. Reports of racial profiling were common. Drivers pulled over for broken taillights that weren't broken, searched without cause, and humiliated in front of strangers. He knew the statistics. He had even spoken about them in closed-door discussions. But knowing the truth in theory and experiencing it firsthand were two very different things. When the flashing lights filled his rearview mirror, he slowed, pulled over to the side, and prepared himself. He was calm. Decades of law enforcement. Experience had taught him patience and control, but he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his stomach. He'd seen too many similar stories end badly. As the officer approached, hand already on his flashlight and a cold stare in his eyes, the FBI director realized this was not going to be a simple traffic stop. Something told him that tonight, the thin line between justice and injustice was about to be tested in a way that would shake the entire system. The officer's boots crunched against the gravel as he approached the car. His flashlight beam swept aggressively over the windshield, the dashboard, and the man's face. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice clipped and impatient. The FBI director complied without hesitation, handing over the documents with steady hands. Years of training had taught him how to remain calm, even under pressure. But the way the officer eyed him, like he was already guilty, was a familiar sting he could never quite get used to. The cop didn't even glance at the license before stepping back. Instead, he circled the car slowly, shining his light across. The tires, the trunk, the back seat. "Step out of the vehicle!" he barked. The director's instincts told him something was wrong. This wasn't a normal stop. There had been no mention of a broken light, no speeding violation, no clear reason for the pullover. Still, he obeyed, stepping out carefully and standing tall under the glare of the headlights. Other cars drove by, slowing as drivers tried to catch a glimpse of what was happening. A few even pulled out their phones, recording from a distance. The officer smirked. "Looks like we've got ourselves a situation here," he muttered, loud enough for the cameras to pick up. Then, almost casually, he leaned down, opened the passenger side door, and with a quick flick of his wrist, slid a small plastic bag under the seat. The FBI director's stomach tightened. He saw it. clear as day. The white powder inside left no doubt about what the officer was trying to frame him for. The officer straightened up, dusted his hands, and looked back at the growing crowd. "Well, well," he said, voice dripping with false triumph. "What do we have here?" The director stood frozen, his mind racing. He had faced criminals who tried to outsmart federal law, corrupt politicians who thought they were untouchable. But here, on the side of the road, the corruption was personal. He wasn't being targeted as the head of the FBI. He was being targeted as a black man. The injustice burned through him, but he kept his face calm, controlled. Exploding with anger would only feed the lie. He had to think carefully. The cop called for backup, already painting the narrative. Suspicious driver, possible narcotics. His words were rehearsed, his performance polished. To the untrained eye, it looked convincing. To anyone recording from the sidewalk, it looked like an officer doing his duty. But the director wasn't just anyone. He had spent his career studying criminals, liars, and manipulators. And he knew something the officer didn't, that every lie eventually collapses under the weight of truth. So he let the scene unfold. He let the officer gloat. He let the bag sit there under his seat like false evidence waiting to trap him, because he knew the moment would come when the badge in his pocket, and the power behind it, would flip this entire charade upside down. Backup arrived within minutes. 2 more squad cars pulled up, lights flashing against the night sky. The officer who had planted the bag strutted confidently, already rehearsing his version of the story for his colleagues. "This one's dirty," he announced, jerking a thumb toward the black man. "Found something under the seat. Gonna be an easy bust." The FBI director stood silently, hands folded in front of him, his calm composure at odds with the chaos around him. The second officer crouched by the car, reaching under the seat. He pulled out the plastic bag, holding it up like a prize. Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Phones were raised higher, recording every detail. The first officer smirked. "Looks like we caught ourselves a criminal tonight." The director took a slow breath. It was time. Reaching into his inner jacket pocket, he pulled out a black leather wallet. He flipped it open with steady hands, revealing the golden badge inside. The letters gleamed under the flashing lights. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Director. The street fell silent. The officers froze, their faces draining of color. The crowd erupted in murmurs. The director's voice was calm, measured, yet filled with authority that cut sharper than any shout. "You just planted narcotics in the vehicle of the FBI director. Every second of this stop has been recorded. From those cameras," he nodded toward the bystanders, "and from mine." He gestured to the small body camera clipped discreetly under his lapel. The corrupt officer's smirk shattered. His hands trembled, his eyes darting between the badge and the cameras around him. I didn't. This isn't." The director stepped closer, his eyes locked on the man who had tried to destroy his life with a single lie. "You didn't just abuse your power. You betrayed the very system you swore to uphold." The backup officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to arrest the man they had been told was a suspect, or the colleague who had just been exposed. For the first time that night, the corrupt cop felt what his victims must have felt. Powerless. And in that crushing silence, his entire world began to collapse. The scene at the roadside became more than just a traffic stop. It became a turning point. Within hours, the footage from witnesses went viral. Millions of people watched in outrage as the video spread across platforms. A uniformed officer planting drugs in a black man's car, only to discover the man was the FBI director. The officer was immediately placed under arrest by his own colleagues, his hands cuffed as the very crowd he once mocked now filmed his downfall. His badge, once a symbol of power, was stripped away in disgrace. The department issued a swift statement, distancing itself from his actions, but the damage was already done. Trust had been shattered. The FBI director didn't raise his voice or seek revenge. Instead, he used the moment to speak to the nation. At a press conference days later, he stood behind a podium and addressed the cameras. This isn't about me. This is about every black man and woman who has been treated as guilty before proven innocent. It's about the countless lives destroyed by lies, by prejudice, by abuse of power. I had the privilege of a badge to protect me. But most people don't. And that must change. His words resonated deeply. Communities demanded reform. Lawmakers called for stricter oversight on traffic stops and accountability for officers who abused their authority. The incident became a catalyst for conversations that could no longer be ignored. As for the disgraced officer, his career ended not with honor, but with shame. What he thought would be an easy frame job instead became a lesson that the entire world watched unfold. And for those who saw the video, one truth remained crystal clear. Dignity and justice are not privileges. They are rights. The FBI director's calm defiance proved that corruption can be exposed, and power abused can be stripped away in seconds. His story was a reminder that silence in the face of injustice is never the answer. So now I'll leave you with this question. If you had been standing on that roadside watching it happen, would you have stayed quiet or spoken up?